Hello, and welcome to the preliminary episode of Can Columbo Crack the Case? I'm your host, Jackson, here to tell you a little bit about what the heck you're listening to. First, let me tell you a little bit about Columbo himself. Columbo was the titular character of a 60s crime drama about an unassuming, shrewd homicide detective. He's the kind of guy that relies more on his charm and street smarts than he would with book smarts. My interest in Columbo first started when I noticed fan comics and video parodies placing him in the modern setting and showing just how charming he could be regardless of the time period he's in. After a while, I decided to watch his show on Tubi and see what all the hubbub was about. So I watched the first episode, then another, then all of season 1. And then before I knew it, I was getting the box set over the holidays and watching the rest of the show. At some point, while watching Peter Falk arrest another upper-class murderer, I thought to myself, is there any crime that Columbo can't solve? The question was rhetorical, but once I gave it some real thought, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Could Columbo prove that King Claudius killed his brother before Prince Hamlet does? Could he expose Light Yagami as Kira? Could Columbo catch Norman Bates or Buffalo Bill before they kill again? Can he change the outcome of these stories? That's what I intend to find out. Now I know what you're thinking. Jackson, out of all the characters you could have picked, why Columbo? For starters, everyone likes Columbo. Even the killers he arrests admit they like him. What makes him stand out is that every episode from his show starts with the killer committing the crime. Right away, the audience knows who the killer is, how they did it, and how they tried to cover it up. Emphasis on tried. Once Columbo shows up, he slowly pieces together what really happened. Of course, as the star of the show, Columbo always solves the crime. But what if we were to place him on an even playing field? Is there a case he cannot solve? There's only one way to find out. First, some ground rules. At the start of each episode, Columbo must have little to no prior knowledge of what has happened unless it is public knowledge. For example, he might know that Batman is a vigilante operating in Gotham City, but he wouldn't know Batman's secret identity. At least, not right away. If there is a crime scene, he can investigate it for clues. If there's a topic he is unfamiliar with, such as urban legends, fields of science or magic, or business practices, he can do research if it is publicly available, like at a library or a bookstore. If it's top secret, he'll need permission to access it, and he may not always get it. If there's an expert, he can question and learn from them as long as they are featured in the source material. We can't just invent new characters to give Columbo an easy win. Lastly, at some point during the investigation, he will get a coroner's report detailing the condition of the body. Depending on when and where the story is set will determine how detailed the report will be. Which leads me to my next point, transplanting Columbo into new settings. Ordinarily, it wouldn't be hard to justify why Columbo gets involved in a case. Maybe the local authorities called him out to help. Maybe he just happened to be on vacation in the same city. Maybe the victim was a very distant relative. However, there are situations where he could be placed in the distant past, or the distant future, or an entirely new world, in which case, he could be modified to be a member of Scotland Yard in Victorian England, or perhaps a street judge in Mega City 1, or a hobbit from the Shire, or a bloodhound in Zootopia. Yeah, it's weird, but it makes more sense than an LA lieutenant showing up in Oz or Tatooine out of nowhere. Now, what criteria does Columbo have to complete to solve a case? Well, he needs to expose the culprit for the crime and either gather enough evidence and testimony to warrant an arrest, or get a confession from the culprit. Now, what criteria does Columbo have to complete to solve a case? He needs to expose the culprit for the crime and either gather enough evidence and testimony to warrant an arrest, or get a confession from the culprit. If another suspect is wrongfully accused, Columbo would need to prove their innocence. Depending on where in the story the investigation starts will affect how much time Columbo has to solve the crime. If he were placed in The Great Gatsby, spoiler alert, the crime would take place at the end of the novel, with Columbo trying to solve the murder of Jay Gatsby. Columbo would have all the time in the world to solve the case. However, If he runs out of leads and reaches a dead end, then he will have no choice but to drop the investigation and label it as a cold case. If the murder takes place at the beginning or middle of the story, like the killings in David Fincher's Seven, Columbo must solve the case before the story reaches its natural conclusion. Columbo doesn't have to save everyone, but in this instance, he has to figure out who John Doe is before he hands himself in and David Mills finds out what's in the box. Sorry, couldn't help myself. Well, that just about covers everything. Oh, wait, there's just one more thing. The killer. Columbo has a bad habit of pestering the top suspect in every one of his cases. They'll tolerate Columbo's investigation to a point, but eventually they will lose their patience. When that happens, they may attempt to contact Columbo's superiors and have him taken off the case. Or they might take out Columbo out themselves or get someone else to do it. Columbo is clever, but he's no match for someone like Candyman or Annie Wilkes. In which case, if that happens, the case would either go unsolved or reach its natural conclusion, and he will have not solved the case. The killer does not have to be apprehended, nor does Columbo have to survive in order for him to succeed. For example, if Columbo can prove that Pennywise the dancing clown is real and killing kids, but the clown escapes, that will still count as a victory. The same will count if, for instance, he exposes Dracula as a murderous vampire, but then gets attacked. Tragic, but the mystery would be solved and the police would be searching for the true culprit. That concludes all the rules of the podcast and what you can look forward to in the upcoming episodes. Thanks for listening. As a special treat for tuning in and listening to all of this hubbub, here's a sneak preview of what the first episode is going to look like, where I cover The Lion King. In the jungle, the mighty jungle, a lion sleeps tonight. Everyone in the Pride Lands mourns their beloved king Mufasa and the young Prince Simba. The king's body was found after a terrible wildebeest stampede at the bottom of a canyon. The prince has yet to be found, but is presumed dead. Mufasa is survived by his widow, Queen Sarabi, and his brother, Scar, who has succeeded him as king. Already, Scar has instituted several controversial policies, including the merging of the Pride with the local pack of hyenas, but many are far too distraught to oppose him. It seems the only one maintaining any order are the ever-busy Zazu and the only remaining male lion left, Columbo of the Lion Guard. Come on, you know the Lion Guard. The team of animals assembled to protect the Pride Lands. They've always been around. It's not like they were retconned just so some incredibly powerful company could make a preschool show based off one of their most popular films. Anyway, Columbo is an older, scruffier lion and current captain of the Lion Guard. Something about Mufasa's death doesn't sit right with him. With the Queen's permission, Columbo decides to launch an investigation to verify whether Mufasa's death was an accident or if there's something rotten in the state of the Pride Lands. Scar isn't convinced this is necessary, but sees no harm in it. As far as he's concerned, he's pulled off the perfect crime. But will his overconfidence be his undoing? Can Columbo uncover Scar's scheme? Can Columbo still smoke a cigar if he has no opposable sums? Can Columbo crack the case?